Breaking news has just come in from Ouagadougou, sending shockwaves across the globe. Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré, has made a groundbreaking decision this morning, one that has shaken the pillars of the global financial system. Events unfolding at the presidential palace in the capital have triggered massive ripples throughout international economic circles. A high-stakes cabinet meeting, which began at 9 a.m. local time, was suddenly disrupted by unexpected developments. President Traoré's bold directive marked a historic turning point, not only for Burkina Faso, but for the entire African continent. His move directly challenges the influence and operations of international financial institutions within Africa. It all began last week when a special audit commission formed within Burkina Faso's Ministry of Finance initiated a thorough investigation. A team of sharp, young technocrats meticulously examined the country's long-standing agreements with the World Bank. The findings were nothing short of staggering. According to the Commission's report, Burkina Faso has repaid over 15 times the original loan amounts in interest alone since 1960. What's more alarming is that many of these loans were tied to phantom projects, roads, hospitals, and schools that existed only on paper. Despite the absence of real infrastructure, interest payments continued regularly, and the debt ballooned uncontrollably. As the Commission dug deeper, they uncovered explosive evidence: secret protocols, corrupt agreements, and confidential documents. These revealed collusion between World Bank officials and former government leaders. Among the most damning discoveries was a 2019 secret protocol in which the government pledged 40% of the nation's gold reserves as collateral for loans, without informing Parliament or the public. Professor Amadou Sawadogo, chairman of the Audit Commission, declared in his statement, "The people of Burkina Faso have endured a half-century of calculated economic exploitation. The documents in our hands reveal not a coincidence, but a meticulously designed system of financial plunder." When the classified documents finally reached President Traoré's desk, the young leader's reaction was nothing short of explosive. According to palace insiders, Traoré was visibly enraged as he examined the files. Without hesitation, he ordered the immediate summoning of James Morrison, the World Bank's West Africa Regional Director. Morrison arrived at the palace that same afternoon with his delegation, completely unaware of the storm waiting for him. Upon arrival, he was escorted by heavily armed palace guards through strict security protocols and led directly to the presidential meeting room. President Traoré was already there, standing tall, eyes intense, his expression grave. The atmosphere was electric with tension. What followed was a historic confrontation. Traoré began by slamming the stack of files onto the table with purpose. "Mr. Morrison," he said, "I have documents here, evidence that your institution has robbed my country and my people for 50 years. Fake projects, phantom loans, outrageous interest rates. And it gets worse. Burkina Faso's official debt is listed as $4 billion, yet we've already paid you $23 billion. What kind of twisted arithmetic is this?" When Morrison tried to defend himself, Traoré cut him off sharply. "Don't speak to me about standard procedures, Mr. Morrison. This isn't procedure, it's organized economic plunder. And it ends now. I'm giving you 24 hours. Cancel these illegitimate debts. Return what you've stolen, or I'll have you and your team arrested for economic war crimes." Morrison invoked diplomatic immunity, but Traoré stood firm. "Those who commit economic genocide," he said coldly, "cannot hide behind immunity. The evidence is here. Our courts will judge you. You will be held accountable." After the fiery encounter, President Traoré appeared before national and international media for a press conference in the palace gardens. Behind him stood the Burkina Faso flag and a towering portrait of revolutionary hero Thomas Sankara. Addressing the nation and the continent, the young leader's voice echoed with conviction. "My dear Burkinabe brothers and all the people of Africa, today is a turning point in our history. For 50 years, we've been deceived, exploited, lied to. The World Bank's so-called development was a cover for theft. Our fathers were misled. Our grandfathers were fooled. But this game ends with us. Africa's wealth belongs to the African people. No more can be stolen. As Traoré held up the documents to the cameras, shock swept through the gathered journalists. Among the files were signed secret agreements, bribe-laden commission receipts, and incriminating bank records. The response was immediate. Massive crowds flooded the streets of Ouagadougou. Thousands of citizens marched to the World Bank office, chanting, "We want our money back." University students carried banners in support of Traoré. Women joined the demonstrations, beating pots and pans in protest. On social media, the hashtag #TakeBackWorldBank surged to the top of global trends. Millions across Africa posted messages of solidarity. Finally, a leader brave enough to stand up to the imperialists read one viral comment. Support began pouring in from across the continent. Mali's president, Assimi Goïta, was the first to officially back Traoré. Burkina Faso is not alone. We too have suffered under this system of financial deception. Now is the time to rise together. Niger's leader, Abdourahmane Tiani, went further, urging all Sahel nations to re-evaluate their ties with the World Bank. Traoré's courage must inspire us all. Africa is awakening, and we are reclaiming our rights. Guinea's president, Mamadi Doumbouya, echoed the call. Our young brother is on the right path. We will follow. Africans must control African resources. Even from Uganda came surprising support. Longtime President Yoweri Museveni publicly praised Traoré. What Traoré has done now, we should have done 50 years ago. It's late, but it's the right move. Meanwhile, panic spread in the halls of power. At the World Bank headquarters in Washington, an emergency meeting was convened by President Ajay Bunga. All regional directors were summoned. The fear, a domino effect. If other African nations followed Burkina Faso's lead, their entire operations on the continent could collapse. The IMF president, Kristalina Georgieva, issued a rushed public plea, urging Burkina Faso to remain moderate. But across Africa, her words were met with fury, interpreted as the panic cries of colonizers trying to maintain control. France scrambled into action. The Élysée Palace activated diplomatic channels. President Macron's Africa advisor was sent urgently to Ouagadougou. The French Foreign Ministry issued a warning to Traoré. But the young president refused to even receive the French delegation. His reply was blunt. First, we will deal with the World Bank. Then we'll settle our accounts with you, too. The U.S. State Department also released a statement. We expect Burkina Faso to comply with international norms. But even that was met with widespread criticism. The world is watching, and a new Africa is rising. However, African experts pointed out that these so-called international norms were nothing more than neo-colonial rules in disguise. But the real shock came later that afternoon. James Morrison and his delegation attempted to flee the country in secret, hoping to escape unnoticed. What they didn't realize was that President Traoré had already anticipated every possible move. Special security forces were deployed. At the airport, Morrison was intercepted before boarding. His passport was confiscated on the spot. Within minutes, he was escorted back to the presidential palace under heavy guard. Meanwhile, a surprise statement of support from the People's Republic of China drew global attention. Beijing declared that every nation has the sovereign right to economic independence, and it must be respected. The China Development Bank even offered interest-free loans to Burkina Faso, an offer that sent waves of discomfort through Western capitals. Then came the strongest statement yet from the Russian Federation. Moscow openly described the World Bank's operations in Africa as modern-day colonialism. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov voiced admiration for Traoré's boldness. The people of Africa have every right to reclaim control over their destiny. But the day wasn't over yet. That evening, a massive leak hit social media, a data dump of classified World Bank correspondence. The leaked files revealed a chilling strategy. A confidential document titled "Strategy to Keep Poor Countries in Debt Forever" went viral within hours. The content was horrifying. Details showed how African leaders have been bought off, how bribes were routed through specific banks, and how media outlets were used to suppress dissent. Everything was spelled out: who was paid, how much, when and where. As midnight approached, President Traoré made his next move. Burkina Faso's security forces raided all World Bank offices in Ouagadougou. Safes were opened. Files were seized. Every document inside was transferred to the prosecutor's office. Soon after, Traoré made a public announcement. These documents will be used as evidence in a court of law. Across the continent, the response was swift. The African Union convened an emergency session in Addis Ababa. Of 53 member states, 41 declared official support for Traoré. A special commission was established to reassess Africa's relationship with the World Bank. The president of the African Development Bank echoed the moment. It is time for Africa to build its own financial institutions. Back in Ouagadougou, the people were still on the streets. All through the night, mass vigils were held outside the World Bank office. The air rang with chants. "We won't let Morrison escape." Young people lit fires and stood guard. Posters flooded the city. Walls were painted with slogans like, "Our hero," "Our leader." Meanwhile, Western media scrambled to spin the narrative. CNN International labeled Traoré a populist. BBC World Service claimed an economic disaster was looming. The Financial Times ran the damning headline, "Burkina Faso commits economic suicide." But African media stood firm, reporting the truth with unwavering clarity. As the 24-hour ultimatum approached its deadline, tension spiked. Reports from Washington were chaotic. Some sources hinted that the World Bank might cave. Others suggested the U.S. and its allies were planning economic sanctions against Burkina Faso. Then, as the first light of dawn broke over Ouagadougou, the world witnessed history. James Morrison was escorted back to the presidential palace. Journalists packed the grand meeting room. Cameras rolled. The world was watching live. Morrison's voice trembled as he spoke. "I've spoken with headquarters. They're prepared to offer debt restructuring, a 50% reduction." But President Traoré shook his head slowly and firmly. "I'm not here to restructure. I want a full cancellation. And I demand the return of the $23 billion stolen from my people." Morrison's face turned pale. "That's impossible," he stammered. "The World Bank doesn't have such authority." Traoré rose from his chair. "Then you leave me no choice." He looked to his security team and gave a single nod. "Mr. Morrison, you are under arrest for economic war crimes." Gasps filled the room. Security officers handcuffed James Morrison. The first time in history a World Bank director had been arrested on such charges. "I have diplomatic immunity," Morrison shouted. President Traoré turned to him with an icy stare. "Those who commit genocide, economic or otherwise, have no immunity." Morrison and his 5-member team were taken directly to Ouagadougou Central Prison. When footage of their arrest was broadcast worldwide, panic erupted across global financial markets. Shares of the World Bank plunged by 12%. Western banks operating throughout Africa went on high alert. At noon, President Traoré addressed the nation once more. Standing before a crowd of over 100,000 people gathered in Thomas Sankara Square, he raised his voice with conviction. "My dear brothers and sisters, today we declare our true independence. No more will we be robbed. Our wealth is ours. Our gold is ours. Our uranium is ours. And we will use them for the well-being of our people." Thunderous applause broke out. Chants of "Long live independent Burkina Faso" echoed through the air. Messages of support from all corners of Africa were read aloud. Young girls performed traditional dances. Elderly citizens wept as they prayed with gratitude. This day would not just go down in Burkina Faso's history. It marked a turning point for all of Africa. From this moment forward, no colonial-era institution, not even the World Bank, will be able to operate freely across the continent. Because now, there were leaders brave enough to say no. Leaders like Ibrahim Traoré. As the shockwaves continued, similar uprisings began to ignite across Africa. In Ivory Coast, youth poured into the streets of Abidjan. The opposition demanded the cancellation of all World Bank agreements. In Ghana, university students organized nationwide protest marches. Traoré's bold stance had triggered a domino effect. Africa was awakening. The economic chains of the colonial past were being challenged openly. Young leaders were rising. The people were reclaiming their rights. The World Bank, once untouchable, now stood cornered like never before. Morrison's arrest had shattered the institution's credibility. And if other African nations followed suit, the World Bank's entire presence in Africa could collapse. With this historic act, Ibrahim Traoré became more than just a national figure. He became a symbol of resistance for oppressed people everywhere. Despite his youth, his courage and resolve inspired millions. The global power structure was shifting, and Traoré stood at the forefront of that change. What comes next remains to be seen. Will the World Bank back down? Will President Traoré push even further? Will Morrison face trial for economic crimes? Will other African leaders take similar action? The answers to these questions will emerge in the days to come. One thing is certain, the balance of global power is changing. This seismic shift caught the attention of the world's emerging powers. The BRICS nations responded swiftly and decisively. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi declared, "We stand with Africa in its rightful struggle for sovereignty and dignity." Brazil's President Lula da Silva called for a unified front against imperialism. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa personally invited Traoré to Pretoria for official talks. Even within Europe, dissenting voices began to rise. Members of parliament from Spain and Portugal publicly demanded a re-examination of the World Bank's role in Africa. A group of Italian senators sent a letter of support to Traoré. In Germany, the opposition party Die Linke released a statement, "We stand behind Africa's rightful demands." In Burkina Faso, the streets pulsed with a celebratory energy. Children in classrooms sketched images of Traoré, their new symbol of hope. Market vendors cried out joyfully, "We've driven out the World Bank," echoing across the bustling alleys. In both mosques and churches, special prayers were held. The elderly, their eyes filled with emotion, whispered, "Not since Thomas Sankara have we seen such a leader." The arrest footage of James Morrison looked straight out of a Hollywood thriller. His stunned expression, the tight clink of handcuffs, the moment he was escorted into the prison van, captured from every angle. While Western media outlets largely avoided airing the dramatic visuals, they exploded across social media. African youth shared them with pride, commenting, "History is being written before our eyes." Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro made an unexpected move, offering discounted petroleum products to Burkina Faso. He declared, "The Bolivarian Revolution now echoes across Africa." Cuban leader Diaz-Canel pledged to send doctors and teachers in solidarity. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister stated, "The axis of resistance against imperialism is expanding." But as support poured in, deep anxiety gripped the World Bank. Across Africa, hundreds of World Bank experts began evacuating their families back home. The Kenya regional office ramped up security. In Nigeria, staff started taking emergency leave. In Ethiopia, the regional center suspended operations altogether. Back on Wall Street, panic was just beginning. Funds invested in African markets suffered steep losses. Commodities markets went wild. Gold prices hit record highs. Experts coined a chilling new PHR. Burkina Faso's intelligence services extracted even more explosive files from Morrison's computer. A decade of classified correspondence revealed how African leaders were bought, coup blueprints, assassination targets, and black ops dossiers. The Provisional Revolutionary Authority, PRA, vowed to send the evidence to the International Court of Justice. Meanwhile, the African diaspora in France ignited in solidarity. Tens of thousands marched through Paris, waving Burkinabe flags. In Lyon, students held a vigil outside the Burkinabe consulate. In Marseille, African neighborhoods burst into celebration. Even across the Atlantic, in the U.S. Congress, voices rose. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, declared, "The World Bank needs urgent reform." Bernie Sanders added, "I fully support the just struggle of the African people." Republican Senator Rand Paul joined the chorus, urging that foreign aid policies must be re-evaluated. In Turkey, while the government released measured statements, public sentiment exploded in support of Traoré. On social media, Turkish citizens hailed him as a hero. Discussions began about Turkey's historic ties to Africa and whether it should now play a more active role in this pivotal moment. Elsewhere in Asia, Japan and South Korea remained officially silent. Yet respected Africa experts in both countries spoke out. Professor Yamamoto of Tokyo University said, "Africa's renaissance has begun." Dr. Hakeem Park from Seoul declared, "This could be the dawn of a new global order." Back home in Burkina Faso, the army basked in triumph. Soldiers rallied in full force behind their young leader. Generals proudly proclaimed, "We stand united with Captain Traoré of the capital." And the people, in turn, embraced their army with pride. One thing was now undeniable. Africa will never be the same again. New leaders are rising. The era of exploitation is being shattered. The African people are claiming the prosperity they deserve. And the man leading this revolution will forever be remembered in history as the brave, young visionary, Ibrahim Traoré.